All right, it's time to begin. I want to welcome everyone to our first session of the day. And right now we have Mark Sullivan from the IDS project presenting on their newest product that's in development. It's pretty exciting. It's called Crosslink. And I'll give it to Mark.
Thank you, Amy. Okay. Hey, everybody. So small group today. So if there's any questions or whatever, please just ask during the session and we'll continue on as we go. That being said, there are a couple of people in the room that are also fully involved in Crosslink. So we've got plenty of people that can answer questions. So first off, the IDEAS project is a resource sharing cooperative or consortium, depending on how you want to look at it. It is a small department that is at SUNY Geneseo in upstate New York. We've been around for about 21 years. We originally got formed because we couldn't get the Olive Universal Borrowing System to work properly in SUNY because of the way we had set up the Olive catalogs. This is no disparagement on Ex Libris. It was the way SUNY decided to set up our system. Then we tried to implement universal borrowing and spent 6 months on that and drove ourselves nuts. So after that, Ed Rivenberg, who was the director at SUNY Geneseo, and I was his systems administrator, sat down trying to figure out what we can do. Well, we ended up using Iliad. We started building a small group of libraries, and we all worked together to build a IDS pilot project. This worked great. Ed retired in 2011. I took over, 2012. I took over as executive director at that point. And we've continued going on and building other systems and helping work with Iliad and also Alma and some other systems as well. The funny thing is, we called it a project because we really didn't think it was going to go for more than 5 years or so. We've been going for over 21 years now. It is a group of 120 libraries across the country. I took it national about 2015, 2016, and we've been growing since then. One of the reasons why we went national was I had one librarian from Middlebury, Vermont, who is now my advisor for peer advisor director. Every time we would bump into each other at the Iliad conference, she would start with, "So I can drive the books across the border. Can we join now?" So eventually we figured out the issues and we went national. So right now we go from East Coast all the way out to Hawaii. So we cover quite a few different time zones, which makes things interesting for setting up some of our online sessions, our forums. Most of the stuff we try to do in the afternoon so that we can actually get everybody involved. We work primarily with Iliad and WorldShare, though we've been doing more and more stuff with Alma. My developer right now is Andromeda, and they are currently working on a system function for IDS logic that will allow Iliad to pull Iliad to pull Alma to check and see if an item has been checked out that's been borrowed. Because if you're running both systems and you create a temporary record in Alma so you can check things out to the circulation desk in Alma doesn't connect back to Iliad to talk. So what we've done is we're building a system that will allow Iliad to pull for those requests to see, has it been checked out yet? Has it been checked out yet? Oh, it's been checked out. I'll update Iliad. Has it been checked in? Oh, the record doesn't exist anymore. It must be checked back in. I'll update it here. The amount of work that goes in each day for staff that are doing both systems, we're trying to find ways that we can minimize some of that. Tim Jackson and Bill Jones are doing a session later today that is also talking about the Iliad Alma stuff. So if you have both systems, definitely go to Tim's. So one of the things that we started trying to come up with was how to deal with all the different silos that we're seeing. We have the WorldShare, Iliad, Tapasa silo. We have the Alma Rapido silo. We have folks that are using Reshare. We have new folks that are using OpenRS. We have folks that are using Autographics. We have a lot of different silos. And a lot of times that means that they're running multiple systems. Other times it means they just don't have the ability to talk to other libraries. So Seb and I were talking 3 years ago now. Yes, something like 3 years ago now about how to do this. And we started messing around with things, trying to come up with ways to do it. And I ended up putting in for an IMLS grant. If anybody's done an IMLS grant, they can be fun. You come up with a few page document trying to explain everything that you possibly can come up with to get them to believe that this is something that they should fund. Then you get a review, and maybe or maybe not, you get your funding. Except for the fact that there's this other step. Once you get past that first one, you've got the full document, about a 10-page narrative, time charts, costs, all this other stuff that you need to submit. So we found out that got the IMLS grant during the IDS conference 2 years ago. So I had hoped at the beginning of the conference that we would be able to make the announcement. I was able to make the announcement at the end of the conference, so that we did get the IMLS grant to start developing Crosslink. So at that point, we put together an advisory committee. The advisory committee has changed a little bit. Tom Bruno was originally part of it and took a new job at Princeton. So John Kaiser stepped in for him at UPenn. Ben Hogben was at Ithaca College and retired, so Sarah Shank stepped in for him as well. The others are still all full members and are working with us on this. Tim Jackson from SUNY, who I mentioned a minute ago, is one of the members here. He has been doing an awful lot of work putting together an ALMA resource sharing network among a ton of different libraries. He has done a wonderful job. I don't know when he sleeps because it is a very manual work that he does. We're hoping that Crosslink will make this a little bit easier for him. We also have Brandeis and Ithaca College, who dropped WorldShare a while back. So they are working on ISO connections as well, and they're working with Tim Jackson on things. The hope for them is to provide them with another network as well. The others are interested in this to kind of expand out and deal with the silos issue. And that's kind of where we're going at this point, is the vision to improve the efficiency and lower the workloads. If you don't have to go into multiple systems every day looking for different requests that are coming in, but can go through your primary system while having the ability to link out to all the other consortia and all the other resource sharing systems, it's going to make everybody's life easier. We also have the issue with libraries not really being able to fund multiple systems anymore. So we're dealing with the fact that they are cutting costs, and cutting costs in this way means they no longer have access to the other services and other systems. We're hoping that with Crosslink, they'll be able to maintain those systems without having to have all the extra cost. So we're trying to promote the interoperability among all of the different systems at this point using ISO 18626. ISO 18626 is the current ILL standard for sending a request from one system to another. The current version is from 2021. They are currently working on a new version for 2024, 2025. I can't remember the.
Probably will be a little later.
A little bit later. Okay. That being said, Clarivate has been putting together a group of organizations and developers that are signing on to an agreement that we will all keep up to the current standards, so that we will all have this information and all have the ability to interoperate with each other. So right now, if you're using ISO 18626, you're manually configuring them. Each library has to go essentially peer-to-peer. There's no real broker that you can set up to work with just one entry and then have all the libraries available. You can't really do all this at scale at this point. Tim's doing it. To be honest, I don't know how sometimes, but he's doing it. But the hope here is we can simplify this process and give him a little bit of time to take some vacation and also make everybody's life easier along the way. But essentially, there is a massive overhead if you're trying to do a lot of the peer-to-peer work. With the current discovery options, this is the other issue, that if you're doing a peer-to-peer, you don't necessarily have a discovery option that can work. So right now, most libraries are using WorldCat. Good system, but not everybody is on WorldCat. We have a lot of small public libraries that just don't use OCLC services at all. They've never been able to afford them, so they are essentially isolated, except for a small group of libraries around them that they share some type of resources with. The Empire State Library Network is one of these groups. They don't have a unique catalog. They don't have a lot of these services. Their hope and why they're supporting us on this is that this will provide them with a union catalog and a way to do resource sharing among all of their libraries, and for the first time, link them into all the academics around them as well. Some of the policy libraries are looking at it from the same way as well. We're hoping that this will create a bridge that just hasn't been there. You also have consortial union catalogs. Alma provides a lot of that as well, and that's a good system there. Then we have our individual library catalogs. We are on a myriad of different systems. We've got WorldCat, you've got Alma, you've got some libraries that are still on Aleph. I can keep going down through the list of different systems. There are tons and tons of them. I've been finding out more and more about library catalog systems over the past year because there are some that I didn't know exist that a lot of the smaller public libraries are using, and we're trying to figure out how we can work with those libraries. I actually have a meeting on Friday to talk to the library directors of Esalen to see how we can sort of move ahead with this as well. So we have three critical infrastructure components that we're building for Crosslink. One is a shared index of holdings. Now, this is not a full BIB system. We don't need a full BIB system. So we are streamlining it for what is required with ISO 18626. Anything other than that, we don't need it. It's extra information. That's for your cataloging system, whatever it is. What we're doing is just maintaining a streamlined resource sharing holdings system. Then we're going to need a directory of services. So this directory is going to have all of the information for each of the libraries. It's going to have what your Z3950 stuff is, what your catalog is, what your resource sharing system is, what your secondary and possibly tertiary resource sharing systems are. We're going to have that information in there. We're also going to end up having some of the IDS logic functions as well in time. If you're not familiar with IDS logic, one of the functions of it is to determine availability lookups in your catalog to see if something's available. Is it checked out? But most importantly, is it in a collection that you loan or don't loan? So we'll be able to determine through Crosslink, even if you don't have other systems, whether or not the item is available and whether the library will lend it to you. We'll have that information upfront based on what we pull back through your Z3950. Very similar to what we've been doing with IDS Logic for about a decade now. Then we're going to have the brokering piece. The brokering piece is actually what is allowing us to have the ISO 18626 connections among the different libraries. So we'll have the borrowing library send the request off to Crosslink. Crosslink will then do a little bit of lookup among the different libraries, determine which one has the item and where it fits in the load balancing scheme, and then send the request off. So this brokering system will allow a communication through ISO 18626. What this means is if you add a new library into the brokering system, it becomes available. We no longer have to do all the work at each individual library. It will become part of the brokering system. As I mentioned before, we have a lot of small public libraries across this country, and Esalen has a bunch of them, and this is why we've been talking with them in New York State. And they don't have systems people. They generally have one systems person for a group. So if you're part of Wadsworth Library in Geneseo, New York, your systems work is outsourced to the county system. So they will send somebody over if something breaks. If your system isn't working, it's all done centrally. You don't have a lot of other things that you can do locally, so you do the best you can. They also have very small budgets. So we're looking at the fact that a lot of the systems and services, they just simply can't afford. If they intend to actually put books on the shelves, they can't do this. And while we are seeing a reduction in physical collections and physical lending, public libraries are still doing a tremendous amount of work and are still the heart of a lot of these small towns. They also don't tend to have a union catalog. So sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's just a union catalog for just the county, but not for the state. And that's what we're looking at in New York, at least. And most don't have an ILL solution. I know we all see the ILL-L emails that go out in search of item. Yep, and a lot of those are small libraries. Now, the academic libraries are also kind of struggling at this point. We're dealing with reduced budgets. We're dealing with reduced enrollments. Geneseo is down about 20% in enrollment from where it was several years ago. That has impacted our ability to hire. We are currently without an ILL staff person. We have our director of access services in the library handling all of our ILL at the moment. This is not something that is unique to Geneseo. We're all dealing with these budget cuts unless you're a very lucky college and library at this point. So we're dealing with reduced staff. We're dealing with how to handle multiple systems. That's assuming we can still pay for the multiple systems. We may not be able to, in which case we're cutting out services that we are no longer able to pay for. So we want to see if there's some way that we can still link back into other consortia that are using other systems, other libraries that are using other systems, because you may have 10 libraries in your locality that are just down the street from you, but they're using different systems, so you don't share. And that doesn't make sense because it'd be a lot cheaper to ship something 5 miles away than something 100 miles away. And I don't know if you're familiar with New York State, but we're kind of long. Granted, not as long as Tennessee. You guys got to speed there, but we are pretty long, and we do go up and down as well. Plus, we've got these mountains kind of in the northern part, which they're gorgeous and wonderful, and they really make shipping books an entertaining expense. So if we can do things locally and we can find out what we have locally and break down these silos, I think we're going to end up being able to cut back on price. Now, this is also where I bring up the fact that CDL is something that we all do need to look in. Yep.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Are you saying when you say the catalog, is this a discovery system for users then?
It will have its own discovery system. This is something that we had a bit of a scope creep. When we were talking about Crosslink, we were going to have a discovery system just for the Crosslink system to use. Then I sat down with the folks from Empire State Library Network, and they said, well, this is great. So it's going to have a union catalog that we can use, right? It could. Yeah, we can probably do that. So went back to the team and we talked about it, and we all kind of agreed on the scope creep. So originally we weren't going to, but we did add a front end to the system now.
Oh.
Yep.
Say a similar reshare uses a similar kind of technology, and I've seen different libraries in the same consortia will do wildly different things with it. Some keep it for staff only, some will link their patron to it if they can't find something in the local system, and some people have even started to embed it like a little bento box or widget in their local discovery tool.
Yeah, my state used autographics and they had a user discovery system, and none of the libraries actually utilized it. So
It's the same kind of tension, right?
yeah.
Mhm. So the Crosslink discovery flowchart. This is kind of what we've got right now. We have data coming in through OAI, and we also have the PODS system. Now, PODS is a wonderful open source system that allows all different types of marked data to be loaded into it, and then it's processed. The beauty of this is we should be able to load data from any different type of library into pods and then have it processed into Reservoir. Reservoir is a storage system created by Reshare. There's a comment I made at NWIL a few weeks ago that we really appreciate the fact that Reshare is open source because we are able to borrow some of their stuff. You know the old adage, amateurs borrow, professionals steal. Well, we borrow some stuff. And it's allowed us to simplify how much we had to build for Crosslink. Now, the OAI setup is Alma and some of the other systems allow us to directly connect the catalog out. So it will update our system automatically with new data as soon as it's put in on a, well, I shouldn't say as soon as, periodically. It's not instantaneous. So periodic update of OAI data. So we have a couple Alma systems right now that are connected in, And they're updating the data into reservoir, which then gets processed into the solar indexing system and then pushed out to Viewfind for our front end. We also have a couple pod libraries. When we first set this up, we had a bit of miscommunication and we accidentally imported Stanford's data. But when we reached out and checked with them, they were thrilled to be involved and everything was fine, which we appreciated as opposed to, we're so sorry. And then we got Cornell's data loaded in right now. What I'm hoping is we can play around with some of the small libraries fairly soon to see if we can get some of their data loaded in based on the different systems they're using. There are a lot of them. So we're going to be playing around with how to export data and get things in. So that's going to be something to play with. Now, the Viewfind front end, we are keeping pretty standard for Viewfind, but we're adding a few other things in. Because this isn't going to be a standalone system, we're going to have multiple libraries on the system. We're going to have a logo at the top. We're going to have a setup so that it will determine which library this is, very similar to the way we did with an old system that we built in IDS called IDS Search. Each library has its own code, and so the URL, if you go to the basic one, will bring up a list of all your libraries. If you have the library ID in your link, it will pull up a specific page for your library. This will then give your patrons a direct link to your library. It'll bring up your logo and any specific modifications you did want to have in your Viewfind lookup. Color schemes, logo, that type of stuff. Book covers, that's standard to Viewfind. We didn't have to play around with it at all. And then we've got your basic bib information. Now, remember what I said, that we don't have a full bib record in here, so you won't be getting a full bib record. You're going to get the basic information, but it should be plenty to give your patrons a good idea of the item that they're looking at. Now, if you look up in the upper right-hand corner, there'll be the login. We're going to have to work with the SAML systems and the single sign-on systems at the different libraries to make sure that we get this to work properly so that they can be authenticated in. We may end up pushing that out. We're still going to be playing with this. This is still something that is in development. We have about 90% of this done, but we're going to be playing with how we do this over the next few months. But the neat thing, if you look in the upper right corner, underneath the login, you'll see the green checkbox next to Milne Library. So this is just the material that's in Milne Library. Then we're going to have the next stage down, which is our local delivery libraries. Remember what I said about having the ability to check just your local libraries that are physically close? We're going to have that information in there, and this would allow your patrons to search just your local libraries. Then you have your different consortia. You have your SUNY, your IDS project, and then all the Crosslink libraries, which would be everybody that's involved in this project. The idea here is you can select local first, but if there's no response in the system, it'll automatically bump up to the next one, then do a secondary search behind there so you have that information. This is something that we had in IDS Logic that people actually really did love quite a bit. Now, if the item isn't available or at your local library, but it is available at one of the other libraries, we'll have the link to whatever resource sharing system you're using. If it's Tapasa, we'll have the link out to Tapasa. If it's Iliad, it will link out to Iliad. If it's to the Alma resource sharing, it goes out to Rapo or Alma. If it goes out to Reshare, OpenRS, we'll have those links built into the system. They'll appear on this page and direct all the information from the request into that system. So your patron will generate the request that way. Then, depending on how you have things set up, we could have it bounce right back out to Crosslink and go to Crosslink libraries, or it can go through your primary systems first. It depends on how you want to have things configured. So what we're kind of looking at this point is, sorry, I've got something floating in the middle here. There we go. All right, so what we're kind of looking at here is how we're looking at your local request management system and the connection to Crosslink. We have our discovery layer, our shared index, and then the central piece is the brokering. That's going to pull data from our directory services, depend on what determine how we want to handle those requests, and then they go out to the other libraries. And we go out one at a time based on load balancing to determine who has, or we check who has it, and then we go out to those libraries. What we're hoping to have is essentially a system that will do all the connection and configuration information in the background so your staff and your patrons don't have to worry about it. We can do all the cleanup work for you and have that set. The request will go out, and then based on how your first library responds, it will either get processed back or it gets it gets sent back, and then we go on to the next library that we've created in our lender list. The communication will go back and forth through the ISO 18626 system. We are working on getting the brokering system up. It's going to be a little bit more time before we can start testing on that. But once we can start testing, and Ex Libris and the folks at Rapido have already offered to help with the testing on that. So we're going to start with those systems, and we're going to see how we can get that working. Once we actually have a brokering system working and it connects through, we'll find out if we have any issues with the communications back and forth. The fun part is going to be if we don't. If we have to add something else in, we will reach out to the folks that are writing the new ISO 18626 standard. Sorry, 18626. Sorry, I got my numbers mixed up for a second. Standards to make sure that what we're communicating to them could be included in the next version. Because if there's some things that are just missing, we need to let them know, and hopefully we can get them added in. In the meantime, we may be able to use APIs. OCLC has APIs, Alma has APIs, Iliad has APIs, Reshare has APIs as well. We'll figure something out with OpenRS. Autographics is going to be another system that we've got to work with. So there's going to be a lot of different things that we're going to be trying to figure out over the next several months. The hope is at this point that we'll have a system that will handle these requests and do this back and forth communication so that both systems, whichever they are, communicate with each other through the broker and actually keep both sides completely up to date. One of the things that we've been doing is trying to find ways of keeping the systems up to date. Andromeda is working on the updating system for Iliad and Alma right now so that all Iliad knows what the heck's going on in Alma. With this brokering system, the hope is we can do this and help you guys keep these systems up to date on what's going on. All right, so these are essentially the different ways that the requests can be processed. It can come through your own interlibrary discovery system and own interlibrary loan system and then get bumped out to Crosslink, or it can come through the Crosslink system. We'll create the request in your system, and then it can either go through your normal process or go out through the Crosslink system, depending on how you want to handle these. So the vision is very simple. It's a very simple brokering system and a very simple union catalog that we're setting up. We are trying to make this lightweight and extensible. We're also trying to make it completely open source. The idea here is if you want to set up your own version of Crosslink on your own system for your own consortia, it's going to be available for you to do that. The only caveat, the only part of the Creative Commons license that will go with this is it must link back to the primary Crosslink system. The last thing the silo buster is supposed to do is create more silos. So we want to be able to have all of the other Crosslink systems linked back to the primary so that we know what's going on and we can actually send requests from a primary to a secondary to a tertiary or whatever. But we want to make sure that they talk to each other. So beyond making this open source, that's really the only caveat we have. We want them all to talk to each other. We want to be able to have a distributed system that doesn't create silos. And that essentially becomes part of our messaging queue and how the different systems work together. We want to make sure that your system gets all the communications it needs. We want to make sure that whether you're borrowing or lending, you communicate with the others. But we also want to make sure that the different Crosslink systems communicate with each other as well. Because if you end up having an unfilled in your version of Crosslink, we should be able to pop that out and check to see in the index of the other Crosslink systems if there is an item available. And if you have borrowing rights from the other libraries in that system, or if we have to work something out. Now, I know one of the questions that's going to come up is there going to be something like IFM? And the answer at this point is we have no idea. That is not something that has even come to really a discussion at this point. There have been other comments from other groups about other different systems for credits or whatever. That's not something that we're really looking at this point. What we're trying to do right now is focus more on how to deal with the silos and those issues. So, as I mentioned, we have been borrowing things from Reshare. They have a wonderful system that Index Data has been working on for quite a few years now. And Index Data is also building Crosslink. So we have been talking with the folks at Reshare and Boston Library Consortium to try to figure out if there's some pieces that we need in there that aren't currently there would be of use to them as well. Plus, there's a few of the older pieces of software that need to be reevaluated and redeveloped that we could kind of help with because we need some changes there too. So we've been having some conversations about how we might be able to do this. All right, so this is what we're currently doing. We are going to be doing a little bit more discovery testing until December. The hope is in the next few weeks, we will have the sandbox up and running for Viewfind, at which point I will set Andromeda free in there and they can start trying to get the IDS logic functions built into the system. They're very familiar with how IDS logic works. They've taken over from Mike Mulligan, who has essentially retired from IDS Project. A little too much going on in his life and his job right now, so he's taken a step back. So Andromeda has gone through and documented all the IDS logic software. So we're going to be bringing some of the IDS logic functions in and some of the IDS search functions in and build those into Viewfind. So essentially this will become a kind of a fork of Viewfind, but we'll see how that ends up working. So we're hoping to have the testing done for the discovery and those pieces up and running by December. We are currently working on the Crosslink brokering piece and the directory information as well. Those sections we're hoping to have an alpha done by December. At that point, we will start playing around with some of the different ISO systems. At that point, Atlas Systems has also said that they'll have their ISO 18626 module up and running. So we will be testing with them to make sure that we can work and that things work fine with that. They are also part of, I believe, the Clarivate agreement to go with the current standards for of keeping up with the ISO standards.
Probably.
Okay. So once we get everything tested, in probably by January, February, we'll start adding more and more libraries in on different systems. We have got several different cataloging systems to work with, and we have several different resource sharing systems to work with. So we are going to be going one at a time. The hope with the cataloging systems is once we get kind of an export set, it's not going to be that bad. So we're kind of looking forward to how we can start working on some of the different systems, and we'll probably be doing that over the next few months. Right now, we've got both Alma and Folio loading beautifully. We will be working on some of the other systems as well. Let's see. We will be testing out some of the other resource sharing systems over the few months as well, and then starting to add those systems in. The hope is by June of this next summer, we will have a fully functional Crosslink system. Now, when I say fully functional, does that mean it's going to have all the bells and whistles that we hope for? No. It means that we'll have a system that works, that will connect and share requests from one library to another, and we will have a functional discovery system as well. We are also at this point starting our business meetings to determine how we're going to fund this for the next decade or however long we keep this system running. We are going to have, like I said, the primary system. And that we're looking at and trying to keep up and running. We're kind of looking at how much it's going to cost to do this, what our estimates are, how much server power we're going to need, and how much development money we're going to need to keep developing and adding in new functions. There are a lot of things that we would love to do with the system. but it is going to take time to do it, and it's going to take money to do it as well. As it's looking right now, Crosslink will not really be a part of IDS project, though IDS project will be a part of Crosslink. So we're kind of looking at how we can restructure this and who is going to be involved in this. So we may be finding a different home for Crosslink. IDS may still be the home for Crosslink. We may have some other workaround at this point. Like I said, we're still just starting the business meetings, trying to figure out how we're going to be doing this and funding this for the foreseeable future. We don't want to build something and then go, we're done. Hey, all right. It's got to be something that we continue with and that we continue to improve on. We feel that there's a lot of different things that we might be able to do, and other modules that we can build on to the systems as well that can help other folks out. Okay.
On this slide, the second one, Crosslink config database dev, says August 15th. It seemed like you referenced December. I was just curious on, is that already up and running, done, or?
That was just the development of the layout of how we want it to look. Okay, so we're still building that at this point.
All right.
So I'm sorry, I should actually clear that up. It's been developed on paper and it's currently being developed online.
As an aside, have you heard from international libraries, or is that still down the road, or have you already?
So this is, I suppose, indirect. And so index data is part of the reshare community as well. I'm part of the reshare steering committee. And I'm also a service provider for reshare. And reshare is itself a kind of distributed resource sharing system that is based on 18626 as the backbone. And so there's a couple of places where Crosslink, as Mark mentioned, kind of fits into where reshare is headed as well. We have a big focus in reshare on cross-consortial and cross-platform interoperability. And Crosslink just fits that really nicely when you already have a system that's based on ISO 18626. So that's one aspect. So there's two places outside of the US where we work with reshare. One is in Germany, where reshare is currently being used to basically implement ISO 18626 in the context of Folio. So Folio is used by a bunch of libraries in Germany. And the other place is Australia, where reshare has been picked as the next generation national infrastructure hosted by the National Library. And part of the vision for that development work is to have interoperability with other platforms. So there'll still be pockets of libraries that are consortia that are running other systems, some of which are already ISO capable, some of them have it on their roadmap, where I see really natural role for Crosslink essentially in providing a bridge between those different systems. So generally, my sense is that there is sort of strong growing interest in ISO 18626, not just here, but elsewhere too. I think people are seeing the benefits of the big platforms, but also some of the drawbacks that arise when a lot of power is concentrated in just one organization. And so ISO 18626 is really a way to say, hey, I want all the benefits of tight integration, but I want to have a model that allows for some more flexibility, right? And that's also why I think both Crosslink and reshare are pushing really hard, as Mark said, on where ISO 18626 is headed. Trying to kind of raise the bar for what you can do, not just throw requests over the wall, but do tracking end-to-end, manage these kind of cross-platform or cross-broker relationships, and deal with things like payments, deal with digital lending, non-returnables and stuff like that. So there's a bunch of stuff going on in ISO 18626 inspired by these efforts.
For about 10 more minutes, there's more questions.
No, I'm at the end of mine, so If we don't have any other questions, I can let you all go a little bit earlier.
I guess I just have one more question on the open source and but needing to tie back if like a group wanted to use it. So does that rule out the potential for a consortia to say, we just need a system to connect our libraries? This wouldn't be the system for them then if they didn't want to participate on a broader scale, they just wanted a platform to connect their libraries, they should look elsewhere.
At this point, they'd have a problem really looking elsewhere if they didn't want to be connected outside, but they could definitely set priority levels. So if they didn't want their folks going out, okay, sure. But I don't see consortia really doing that at this point. Most really do want to work together. I know with the work that Tim's been doing, he's been pulling in a lot of different consortia. So I'd be surprised if that was actually an issue. But if they did have a major issue with sharing outside the consortia, yeah, maybe that would be. They'd have to try and figure something else out because essentially they would be creating another silo, and that's what we're trying to avoid right now.
Could see you.
Sorry, I imagine like location has something to do with that.
Right.
I
I
would
know our public libraries in Tennessee, you know, we use Share It to share with the public libraries and they share with each other using that, but there was concern about shipping.
Mhm.
So shipping outside of that network would probably be a financial difficulty for some libraries.
Yeah, definitely. But would they be willing to share an image? Yeah, so we may be able to do electronics. Now, when IDEAS Project first went outside of New York State, we did electronic preferred, essentially article preferred. And the idea was we didn't want folks having to ship back and forth. Then we were trying to isolate local groups for physical, and we were able to do a lot of that with IDEAS logic. So I think we could have something set up so that if someone did request a book from a small public library and shipping was a problem, that there could be some communication back and forth on whether or not they would actually lend it. And there's never a reason or never you have to ship something. You can cancel a request and have it go on to the next library in the lender string. You can also set up different priorities so that you, of course, are going to be going here. Now, if this is the only one in the country, because this is, say, some genealogy material from that local library, then the hope there would be that we could work out a book chapter or a couple pages out of the book instead. So maybe that would be more communication. And maybe that's actually something part of the messaging piece that we've been kind of thinking about, where it's not just some very, very basic information, but maybe we can actually have a conversation between the two systems then, and we can actually have this. We can't ship the book, it's too expensive. It's also, this is the only copy that exists. We are not shipping this anywhere because of risk of destroying it. What pages do you need? Well, I don't know. Well, maybe we can actually do something else. And it becomes a communication about this is what we're really looking for. I need the Sullivans that were born in this time period in this area. Can you get me this information? And it becomes more of a conversation.
One of the ways that the work we're doing in Australia is really stretching what we've done with ISO 18626 and Reshare at this point is they have this notion of a multi-tier sort of complex collaboration, where you've got local affinity groups or circles of libraries that are working closely together with free reciprocal agreements, right? You've got wider circles where you want to be able to describe and capture service levels and costs. And be able to say, okay, I will lend to this consortium at the other end of the country, but there's going to be a cost involved, but there may be a different delivery time with different lending periods and so on. So you want to find a way to capture that in the conversation. And then on top of that, as a future development, they want a direct centralized portal for paying for and requesting documents for libraries across the country with ideas that you want to be able to use essentially the national libraries as kind of a document delivery infrastructure, but particularly with the focus on rare materials, where you want to be able to go find something that's unique or special someplace and then go in and ask for a quote to have a electronic copy of that created for you, and then that flows through that system. So I think if I was to try to see where this is all headed, you gotta think a lot of this ends up being about the directory and understanding what these type of integrations are asking of our service directories. And I wouldn't be surprised if we'll see developments of that coming along. And there's already sort of a lively conversation in the ISO 186 community about what do we need from a shared directory of service to really support these kinds of things. So for you to be able to capture that, yeah, you want to support these standards, but you have a particular relationships with libraries that are nearby, and you want to be able to model out that you have relationships with other groups in the vicinity. And then you may have some broader work for fee type of relationship going on, a high level for fee relationship with somebody like across the country and another country.
Speaking of ISO standards, Alan Jones is not able to join us at the conference, but he will be recording a session and that'll be available once we get all the other recordings uploaded.
Yeah, and very apropos. I mean, that's his thing.
Just a few quick words on communication with patrons. I'm guessing it's via email.
Communication for patrons would be through your primary system. So however you normally do them.
And patron data confidentiality.
Would be pretty much the same way we do patron data with IDS Project. We don't want it. We don't want it.
It's a funny thing in a consortial setting, right? Because ISO ILL doesn't require it. It has room for it. In a consortial system, the one thing that kind of brings it a little bit is if you want to have a really slick workflow, you sometimes want to have a book band put on the material by the supplying library that has the name of the patron on it, because that makes life really easy by the time it's received by the readers. So that's kind of the one exception where in a tight consortial system, you want to sync that across. Just for efficiency, but you don't really want to store it anywhere. And there are other situations where you really don't want that. So you want to keep it tight.
But I don't understand from, and apologies, from the discovery, the user requests something, that request will never land in Crosslink with the user information. It will go to primary system that the library is running, and then that system is what goes out to Crosslink. So you're running the discovery, but your discovery is disassociated with your backend broker infrastructure. So someone has to run a system, whether Alma or Iliad or something, to have the request come into reshare before it can kick out to Crosslink. Okay, I'm just putting the pieces together.
Crosslink is a link. It's a bridge between systems. We are not trying to replace Tapasa, Iliad, Reshare, Autographics, any of those systems. We're trying to make a way for these systems to talk to each other. So we have no reason to store the user request information or the user information for the request. Now, the request information that comes through from the ISO connection back, that we do store so that we can pass that along to the lending libraries. But there's no reason to have the user information because we have that stored at your local library. We just have the request information. And then we have your tracking number here, and then we have your identification number here for in the lending side. And we just create a match table that allows that information to be passed back and forth.
I guess I just assumed because you were talking about some of the small libraries you want to support that don't have ILL systems or others. So I didn't, and that was primarily, or one of the things that pushed the discovery piece up in the decision tree. I was assuming Crosslink would store those requests for them since they don't. So they would have to.
There would be something probably with Reshare.
Purchase another system.
There would probably be something with Reshare that they would have to set up for their libraries as well. And since Reshare is also an open source system, they could do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we are at time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.